All right, the floor is now mine. Now we're real. Now it's official. I'm Adam. Hi, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Hi to our panelists. So we're going to talk about language learning today, a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And I often like to say that everyone in the world, if you ask them, wants to learn another language and lose 5 pounds. And mostly, if it's me, we're watching Netflix and we're eating chocolate, right? And this is a panel of people who have made it their life's work to help people really achieve not just the aspirational goal of language learning, but the actual goal of language learning. So we're going to go a little bit deep into that. I'm excited to be here with the panelists. Let me just start with Hugh Yao, who's the CEO of LingoAce, based in Singapore, a Tsinghua graduate. And your primary audience today is kids who are learning Chinese, who are many of them originally from Chinese-speaking families or people of backgrounds of Chinese-speaking families. Is that a reasonable summary? And that's just where you're starting.
Okay, actually, I can introduce the company a little bit. So LingoAce is based out of Singapore. So actually, we provide online language learning to the young kids, for 3 to 15 years old. So we really specialize on the age group. So we develop very intense, and very immersive environment, and also the animation gamification to help the young kids to learn language. So the last 4.5 years, we only focus on Chinese language learning. So we hire the native speaking teachers from China and to really provide the service to students and from more than 100 countries. And actually, it's our pleasure here to really announce that. And we recently launched our English Live class and globally. So basically, we hire the certified teacher from North America and the UK to really conduct the very, very same quality live teaching to the students globally. And of course, all this appreciate to our investors because during last 2021 alone, we raised 160 million. So that's why we entered a new space to serve to a new customer. So that's kind of the high-level introduction about the company.
That's great. And by the way, we love announcements at the ASU+GSV conference. So this is a new product announcement from you just today, right? It's going out on the PR wires today, right?
That's right. It's a big day for us.
Business Wire. Yeah. Sorry, it should be clear. All right, thank you. Let me also welcome Kirsten Campbell-Howes, the Chief Learning Officer at Busuu, now part of Chegg. You have been with the company for 13 years in senior leadership positions and have a long track record here. You also have a degree in, is it applied linguistics? So fantastic. Welcome. Anything you want to say a little bit about your work at Busuu as we kick off?
So Busuu is a kind of community of 120 million language learners all around the world, mostly adults. And community is really the heart of Busuu. And everyone who learns on Busuu is not only a learner, but also a teacher. We connect people together, and we help them to gradually build their confidence and their fluency through meaningful interactions.
Wonderful, and welcome. And where are you in from today?
I don't know. My brain is very fried with jet lag, but I think I came from England sometime
You think
ago.
you came from
England?
Yeah. I was going to say, this is the panel that will most be fighting jet lag of any panel you'll see today, with the exception of Taylor, who's based in LA. Taylor Nieman, who's the CEO of Toucan, which is a language learning app. It's actually, I guess, more fair to say a browser extension, which helps you learn another language as you're working on other activities. Anything you want to share briefly about Toucan?
We're probably the baby on this stage, but we're very excited to be amongst the giants. We're just over 2 years old, around 500,000 monthly active users. We can't stop growing, and have over 132 language vectors now as of January, which is pretty exciting. So that's not just English to Spanish or Spanish to English, but Spanish to Korean, and Korean to French, and French to German.
Fantastic. And Markus Witte, who's the executive chair of Babbel and founder of Babbel, and is based in Berlin. And share a little bit more about the work you do at Babbel. I'm a user, by the way, of all the products except LingoAce, but now I'm looking forward to joining LingoAce as well.
Very good. Thank you. So Babbel has been around for quite a while. Started actually as a website before there was an app store. And over time, we always put the learner interest first. So we learned that you can't learn a language just with an app. And that made us to venture into different spaces and add more modes of learning I guess we'll get to those things later on in the panel. And I think the one thing that sets us apart is that we never started with a solution, but always with a question, which connects very strongly to my expertise, which is very little. So
we have the same expertise. Okay. What is the question? Or just generally, it's a question.
The question
is there a specific question?
What's the best way to learn a language for almost everybody? So for average people like me.
Great. Well, so we have a question I want to kick this panel off with, just a sort of a speed round to get us going. Hugh, we'll start with you. Why should people learn other languages? Like, what is the reason to do it?
Yeah, actually, and learning language definitely is my passion. Actually, I was born in China, but actually I moved family from China to Singapore 10 years ago. So my child was also raised in a multiple culture environment, right? So actually, we sent him to American school. So those kind of things make my family is really about between different cultures. I truly believe that learning a new language is kind of the multiple culture communications. It is really about matter for the future of the business, the future of life. So that's why, yes, we know there kind of the translation tool is there, but beyond translation, I think the understanding of the culture, the communication between people are very, very important for our generation and the next generation. So that's why LingoAce, we focus on younger generation to help them and understand and learn the language when they are young. That's kind of our passion.
Kirsten.
Well, I have a very different background to Hugh's. I come from a very monolingual kind of culture and environment, and where I grew up in Scotland, learning a language is not natural, and often people don't really understand the point of it, and I was no exception, really. But I did learn a bit of French, and I remember the first time I spoke French to a French speaker, and she understood me, and it was a very powerful moment, and I suddenly, I don't know, I felt like a different person, and it was like the world got a little larger for me. And then as an adult, I traveled to China. I learned to speak Chinese, mostly from talking to taxi drivers. They were my teachers. And I don't talk Chinese very much now, but when I do, I almost always start feeling like I'm going to cry. There's something very emotional about language learning. It connects to different parts of your brain, and I really believe that it opens your brain up, not just to other cultures, but to yourself as well. It makes the world a bigger, brighter, more interesting place. And that's what I and my team try and do. We try and help people for whom maybe learning a language is not such a natural thing and is a hard and difficult thing, and we try and help them to see why there's so many good things you can achieve through learning a language.
So for us, our vision is to make the world multilingual, and that's a pretty lofty goal, but just our pure engagement retention metrics, I think we're on the good path to already doing that. But with that, and being a language acquisition business, our core audiences tend to range. Like, it could be 5-year-olds using Toucan all the way to 100-year-olds, making it to the 3-digit number, and in between.
Did you point at me specifically on that? No, it's related to a question something my child said before the cameras went on. So
exactly,
okay.
For the birthday. And everything in between. And so with that, we're global businesses. And so the reasons range completely. Like, if someone's learning English, that may be because they really want to move themselves from a socioeconomic standpoint. And that's really exciting. But someone in the US may be learning French to go to Paris. Or maybe they just met someone who they want to speak to their family or their grandparents to from a romance angle and everything in between. So I think the reasons can really range, and that's pretty exciting as far as our user base and what we're seeing too.
Yeah, I would totally agree to that. There's probably as many reasons to learn a language as there are people in the world. And I think what brings it together is it makes you a better person in a way. So of course it helps your brain capacity and capabilities. It makes you more open to the world, more receptive, and helps understand each other better. So I think it's not one single reason. It's one reason for everybody, at least one, and many of us have multiple reasons to learn.
So let's talk about what it is to actually learn a language, because it sounds sort of easy and trite, but really what we're talking about is multiple different vectors, right? There is learning to speak, learning to comprehend, potentially learning to read and learning to write. And based on the language, there may be a lot of interplay amongst those. How does each of you think about which of those you're trying to do and in what order? And let's kind of go in reverse order, Markus.
Yeah, our focus is conversations in real life, because what we found is, almost all our learners have to work with the motivation they have, and it's very hard to motivate people. So the thing is to not wear off the motivation too fast. And the one thing that does motivate people is if in the real world they have this moment that Kirsten talked about, where you actually talk to somebody else and actually have the first moment of using your language skills. And to get there, conversational skills are the key. So what we try is to give people the means to enter a conversation very, very quickly. And more than 50% of our users say they can do that with less than 5 hours of using the app. So that's what we 100% focus on for the first phase. Of course, then it differs from there on.
And how about you have a really interesting approach to language learning, and it's a bit novel. So talk a little bit about where you're trying to help people enter the space.
Yeah, so we actually distinguish Toucan as we lean on the language acquisition side instead of language learning. And so we use that term quite a lot. And it is fairly different in that language learning tends to be very conscious, like flashcards, quizzes, games. And we have those within Toucan, but that's not our bread and butter. Our bread and butter is language acquisition, which is really how we all learn our first languages, right? It's like contextual immersion, or if you remember your parent or if you have kids, you say a vocab word just enough to challenge them, but not to frustrate them. And so we immerse people as they're browsing the web. And anecdotally too, people probably told you watch Friends with French subtitles or read Harry Potter in Spanish, and you might have even changed your iPhone to Portuguese one day, but 100% immersion is really difficult for your brain to understand. It just shoots it out as gobbledygook. And so we very intelligently be able to prioritize keywords, phrases, sentences in almost a Spanglish manner as you're browsing the internet in order to continually challenge you without frustrating you.
I will say I had a really funny moment with Toucan the other day. I got a notice from the IRS, and I was trying to read it, and it translated portions of it into German as I was doing it. And Markus, you weren't here to help me with that, but it gave me a great tool to understand what it was saying, and the translations were contextual and really helpful. So I was very motivated to learn. By the way, everything was fine.
Moments of joy.
Kirsten. You think of yourself as teaching more the most serious or focused learners. Is that a fair assessment?
We call them committed learners.
Committed.
So we tend to focus on learners who are prepared to spend time and money on learning, rather than just super casual learners. And speaking is the skill that our learners tell us they want to master the most. And so we embed interactions with other people in the community throughout the learning. And we've started to bring in live lessons with professional tutors as well to really accelerate that spoken fluency. But our learners also suffer from language anxiety, which is a real condition. And they're often quite intimidated by having these conversations with other people. So a lot of what we do is trying to balance that journey out. So it's not all speaking, which can be very overwhelming and intimidating. And we really focus a lot on receptive skills as well, on listening and reading. The research shows that you need to acquire a lot of language receptively before you start to be confident with production. Ideally, millions and millions of words. I'm not sure our learners quite have the patience for that, but we do try to provide them with a lot of graded listening and a lot of graded reading so that they're absorbing the language and then gradually building up the capability to begin to produce it themselves. But it's a fine art, balancing the different skills.
And Hugh, I intentionally talked about the interplay of the writing system, the orthography, because obviously if you're teaching mostly simplified character-based Chinese, is that right?
Yeah, actually, and in our system, actually, we take slightly different approach because we focus on the narrow segment, right? So from 3 to 15 years old. So we focus on the group not a really very broader audience. So that's why we can be very, very comprehensive. So because we believe something like, listening, speaking, and the writing and the reading. So these 4 elements, they have kind of the connection with each other. So that's why, for example, if the kids doesn't really have enough inputs from the reading, so it's very difficult for them to really be able to have the very good comprehension skill. So from our curriculum design, we do have a very comprehensive structure. So that's why, and when they are young, we give them a lot of the inputs. So they can really grow with the system when they're getting older. So they have the ability and also kind of the foundation to be able to comprehend themselves. So that's why actually, we focus on quite comprehensive, and we build a lot of the gamification to make them actually feel fun of that. Because sometimes when the young kids, acquire a new language, it's a little bit boring. So I just share a story with them. Actually, I just bumped to one of our customers in this location, basically, and he told me about his daughter, and used to learn with other, and in language school, but actually it was boring, right? So, but actually, with us, we have a lot of very highly trained teacher. We have very interactive and gamification. So the young kids, they start to like the learning. I think enjoy learning itself. Sometimes is even more important than learning, right? So that's why they enjoy. So they would like to put time. They would like to stay focused. So the result will come, sooner or later.
Okay, şimdi Türkçe'de konuşalım. Now we'll switch to Turkish. Of course, we don't all speak the same language other than English, so we'll stick with that. But I actually want to talk a little bit about obstacles to learning. So if Kirsten, let me go to you because you raised the first question, which was anxiety. What are the obstacles to learning? Because so many people, if you believe what I said at the top, which is that everyone wants to learn more foreign languages, right? In the room, how many of you have an aspiration to learn another language other than the one you speak? So more than half the room, or about half the room. By the way, the rest of you, let's get more ambitious, okay? You can do it. But so many of us have that ambition, and then if you look at how many people are able to connect through and do that, it's a smaller number. So maybe you could share first what you think the greatest obstacle is, and then I'll ask the same of the other panelists.
Oh, well, our learners tell us that it's lack of time, but we don't tend to believe them because they're watching Netflix and TV and all these other distractions. A lot of people tell themselves that they can't learn a language. I mean, how many times have you said yourself or heard other people say, I'm just no good at learning a language? But actually, we all are. It's innate to us. And if you threw us all into a total immersion environment, my goodness, we would learn pretty fast the language of the culture we were immersed in. It's totally natural. But it's so easy to be distracted. I'm learning Spanish at the moment, but I'm doing it in an English-speaking environment. I'm surrounded by Spanish speakers, but our lingua franca is English, and I'm not going to waste their time practicing my bad Spanish on them. It would just slow everything down. So time, distraction, and the nagging voice in our head that says, I can't, those to me are the biggest obstacles.
And Markus, let me go to you and ask you. You've been dealing with people and trying to get them over this obstacle for a number of years now.
Yeah, definitely time and focus are important, but what our research shows is basically 2 things. One is we as grown-ups are really bad in making mistakes. We always try to avoid mistakes, and that keeps us from learning. Not only languages, it keeps us from learning, period, and it's a huge obstacle. The other point is that my mother language always feels perfect to me. I mean, my German is far from perfect, but it feels perfect to me. And every other language, including English, for me feels like not quite there. I always have this feeling of I'm not speaking well enough in any language I ever learned. So that is an ongoing frustration that is really hard to shake. So these 2 things I would put first. We can't make mistakes, and it always feels like not good enough.
Always feels not good enough. Okay. How about you, Hugh? What are you seeing?
Yeah, actually, I agree with human being doesn't really like making mistake, right? So especially in front of many others. So I don't want to emphasize that part. I think from our observation, it's really about the rewarding system, right? When a student they learn something, especially a language, so the learning curve to offer new language is pretty tough. So the first maybe few months they put a lot of the effort, no matter adult or child, right? They put a lot of the effort, but actually they get very, very little and improvement. So that's why we observe the first 3 months, a lot of the kids, maybe they drop off, right? So that's why only after they pass the curve, they can really enjoy the learning. They can really have the sense of the achievement, which is very, very important. So that's why we think the rewarding system is very, very important. When they have just a little improvement, and our system can really give the reward to them, so they enjoy the learning journey instead of they make big improvements, they get a reward. So that's kind of the very important. Of course, we are still working on a lot of the technology to improve that, but this kind of our observation, how to give the reward and as soon as possible to encourage the young learners.
It's a great point, right? Because our expectation, I think, oftentimes going into language learning are the mistakes that we're going to make. And if I go in thinking, oh, I'm going to get a reward instead of I'm going to get a mistake, it shifts the sort of balance of my psychology. And then Taylor, the same question to you. What obstacle are you trying to help people over?
So how many of us have tried to create a new habit? Like going to the gym, cooking at home, not ordering Postmates, calling a friend, texting me. Like, creating habits is so hard to do, even with the best of intentions, because a lot of people raise their hands like we all want to learn a new language, but are we setting people up for success? Because people are busy throughout their day, and I saw this firsthand. I was one of the earliest employees at Headspace, where we were asking people for just 10 minutes to sit there, basically do nothing. And we had all the science and research to show people why this meditation was so good for them. And so with Toucan, we're meeting people where they are in order to help go with the flow throughout their day versus against it, because to this Netflix point or Twitter or Reddit, wherever you are across your internet, you are doing other things, but can we meet people where they are so that they can do both at the same time and then still benefit from all of this input that we're talking about, like millions of concepts coming into you just from the pure frequency amount of browsing the internet that users are doing on a daily basis.
Okay, so one of the things I heard from everybody was fear of mistakes in one way or another is something that people have a hard time overcoming. Let's talk about some mistakes we've made. We're in the business of helping people learn language, and all good cocktail parties have someone, if you talk about language, telling you the dumbest thing that they said. I'll kick it off with mine, and then I'll ask each of you to share some tidbit, right? So I've been a partner at GSV now for about 8 months. It's fantastic. I speak some Japanese. I was speaking to my father-in-law, who's a Japanese speaker, who asked me what I was doing, and I very carefully said that I'm the word for to invest is toshi suru, and so he asked me what I was doing, and I said I was tosan suru, a bunch of education companies. So if you speak Japanese, what I was telling him was repeatedly that I am bankrupting education companies. And I kept explaining to him, thinking I was saying investing, and he kept looking at me like I had 3 heads, and finally he sighed and looked at me and said, I will never understand American business. I'm now much more careful and know the difference between toshi-suru and tosan-suru. Anyone else want to share a funny language learning blip?
I'm happy to share. So our technology is pretty complex, and if you download Toucan, we're still nowhere close to 100%, but please download and help us get better. But some fun examples are like Chuck E. Cheese, for instance. Initially, we were translating proper nouns, so it came out to Chuck E. Queso, or Bill Gates was Bill Portas. So these really silly moments that our users are like, hey, I don't know if you want to be translating that, and then us getting better, but it provides some moment of joy too.
Anyone else want to dive into this pool?
I have.
Don't be afraid of mistakes. It turns out you have to overcome them. We just learned this.
Yeah. Well, when I just moved to Shanghai, I was in the police station filling in my alien residency form, and I thought I would try my Chinese on the policewoman, and I'm not going to say this term in Chinese, but I thought I was asking her if I could borrow her pen, and actually I asked her if I could borrow one of her reproductive organs. She did not have a sense of humor. And I learned a lesson that day.
Hugh, any for you?
Yeah, actually, and that was really a conversation with one of my colleagues in US, and the first day I arrived. So we have a chat because she married an American, right? So they talk about actually someday they would like to go and walk the dog, right? It's pretty common, but actually, they do some translation, through a very famous translation engine, right? Everybody knows that. So the idea would be kind of that's be the servant who very belittles, to get advantage from the master. So it's the kind of the idea, it's just very normal wording about and walk the dog, but it becomes.
But it became this very, very different concept.
That's right.
Funny.
Right. That's kind of the between a Chinese and the Americans conversation with each other. So I think basically, of course, I did some research. Recently, we see the translation engine has improved. Now they get it.
Great. Markus, you want to jump in this one?
Yeah, of course, like anybody, I have a bunch of stupid things I said, even in English, without knowing. But I think the thing that resonates worst in me and still gives me sweat in my sleep is in the beginning of Babbel, I was doing the CRM, the send out of emails myself. And it's a database thing. And the database gives back null if there's no record. And I was sending out a newsletter to France, and it would fill in the name, but somehow the result was empty. So it always said bonjour nul. So meaning
zero.
No, it's not even zero. It's really something you don't say to people. And we got so many complaints for that single send out of newsletters, and I pushed the button and it felt terrible. It still feels terrible.
Let's dig into sort of a little bit more about the business side of language learning. One of the things that I think is often very hard in the language learning business is consumer retention. Right? People get very excited. Maybe it's New Year's. They've just gone to a party. They're excited they're going to learn a new language. They sign up. Many companies now have a 1-year plan to capture that energy. But then if you look at their engagement, it often falls off. What do you think of as being an ideal retention or engagement rate, or reasonably ideal retention or engagement rate? And how do you re-engage learners if and when they do drop away? Taylor, why don't you want to jump in?
I mean, this is one of our superpowers, but I think it's really important for people to continue engaging, because if anyone took a course in school for 9 years, I took Spanish, but all I remember from that is ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Like, where is the library? Not very useful, but it's because I wasn't using it and I lost it. I think what's interesting about what we're building is, for one of the first times, we can leverage gamification, rewards, motivation in a really interesting way where we don't have to do it to try to get you to open an app. We can instead do it in order to enhance your learning experience. And so what does that then look like for this longer journey across that entire year? Whether it's you're really excited, New Year's resolution, New Year's, new you, same with going to a gym, right? Gym's packed in January, but then no one's there in February. How do you keep that going farther? But that's one of the exciting things about Toucan for sure.
Kirsten, how do you do it? You've got the committed learners, but all learners, I'm sure, have moments of like losing their commitment a bit.
Yeah, I mean, especially in kind of B2C adult language learning. I mean, obviously the dream is someone signs up and then they come back day after day after day until they hit the final test and they're fluent. But life is not like that for most adults. And so we've tried to build a course or set of courses that are flexible enough to people's lifestyles that they don't feel, a competitor who isn't here is famous for sort of sending quite chastening emails to people if they don't keep to their schedule. We don't really believe in that, because our learners are mature enough to know when they need to take a few weeks off, So we try and build this flexibility in, and I think that's important. But we also try and build in tools that help people to see their progress, which is really important if you're going to come back, right? You need to be able to go, I'm doing more now than I was 3 weeks ago. So through various product features, through the way we train our teachers, it's all about helping learners to see this is how far I've come, and that is the seed that helps them to keep coming back again and again.
It's an interesting point. I'd like to go from that back over to Hugh on this same point of retention and keeping people. It's really also engagement is the positive side, I guess, of the retention question or the churn question. You know, I feel like I log into Zoom, 8 times a day, and if my hair is brushed and my clothes are fitting right and all of that, I'll still find something wrong with myself and focus on that when I look at myself in Zoom. Instead of saying, gosh, I got all the other stuff done and I'm actually making a cogent point today, maybe that's enough. How do you, and Hugh, you talked a little bit about this. You talked about positive rewards and reinforcements, and especially with little kids, so important. What do you do to get them to want to come back every day?
Yeah, actually, and everybody knows that retention is the core of the business, right? So that's why actually, and our situation is a little bit more complex than and everybody else because we are working with the younger children. So we are dealing with two different audience. One is the children, another is the parents. So that's why actually, and what we do is really about we use a lot of the and the gamification, animation to make sure the young kids enjoy the learning itself. And also we develop a system to really show the learning outcomes to the parents. So actually somehow I think as a company we work as a partner to our parents. So the parents can really work together with us to improve the retention of the younger children. So that's why, and not only about the fun, but also about the learning outcome, also very important. So we marry these two together so that to serve the different audience of our community.
So can I push in on this a little bit? Because you made the point that you have the parent who's paying and is quite motivated, but not doing any of the work. And then the student who has to do the work. And I'm quite good at nagging my kids, but I'm not good at getting them actually to want to engage. And you kind of need both.
Yeah.
So what do you do to make the kid keep wanting to come back?
Yeah, so basically for the young kids, for example, actually, and we partner with Zoom. And we use Zoom SDK as the infrastructure. We build a very, very interactive classroom. So in the classroom, not only just have the gamification, animation, but also we give the real-time reward to the students. So that's why the young students, they feel the encouragement anytime in the classroom. We don't need to wait maybe after 1 month, we give kind of big reward. So actually in the classroom, we give the very interactive real-time trophy to the young kids. So they enjoy this kind of an encouragement. So actually, and a lot of the young children, they really look forward to talking with the teacher again. Even every week, maybe 2 or 3 classes. So they couldn't really wait until another one. So that's kind of we do a lot of the rewarding and the feedback system to really encourage them. That's kind of the one part for the young children. As long as the young children enjoy the learning, I think most of the parents, they are willing, to be honest, they are willing to pay. Actually, basically, they are willing to really continue to go with us because it's more efficient. They see the results. They see the kids enjoy that.
So at the end of the day, you've got that parent to be like, you're going to do the class. Yes, you get a trophy, but you're going to do it. You don't have that parent with your adult language learner, Markus. So what's your strategy?
Well, most of them have parents.
Or at least have had.
But they pay for themselves. I would say if I had a simple answer to your question, we wouldn't have a business. Because I think this is the single most important things to work out over time for a language learning business. And it's the most important differentiator between why some of the language learning companies are more successful than others. And I think it's such a fine balance between bringing down what we call micro-frustrations, so these small moments where you lose a bit of motivation on a recurring basis. It's about helping people to get to those moments of success. And it's also about going towards that point or helping them to do what they want to do. So learn for a time and then not learn for a time. It's not, if we would have the pipe dream of somebody, like Kirsten said, like learning consistently for 2 years, that would be crazy. We need to be more flexible in that, but it's such a hard thing to do. It took us really, really long to get halfway to where we want to be, and I think we're pretty good at what we do, but I think it's the biggest differentiator in the industry and the biggest driver of success.
Fantastic. We have just a couple minutes left. I want to have, we've taught you four represent four really fantastically different and successful approaches to language learning. So I'm going to give you each a sort of a minute to leave everyone with sort of one final thought that you want them to take away about either their own language learning journey, or if they're interested in being an entrepreneur in the space, what you'd recommend. It's an open floor. And let me start with you, Taylor, for the open floor.
Open floor. Well, if you're an entrepreneur, get started. The smallest MVP, just start. And then if you're on your own language journey, give Toucan a try, download us, shameless plug, and send me feedback too. But also think through kind of what we've all been talking about, like what are your motivations for doing this? Because that might also help you propel in whatever direction or whatever tool you want to use, because there's so much within the entire language acquisition learning industry, like so many different tools, and we're not all for everyone. And so just take that with a grain of salt too as you're looking for what's best for you.
Great. Markus?
Yeah, it's what I would say if you really want to learn a language, remember how human we all are, and go back to that, and don't number one, believe in silver bullets or any magic ways to learn a language. Whoever is telling you our AI will help you to do that in a magical way, they're bullshitting you. It's human learning, not machine learning, that this is about. And be forgiving with yourself and happy to make mistakes.
Kirsten?
If you're an entrepreneur setting up a language teaching company, make sure you have a teacher in your founding team.
So smart.
Very easy to make some very bad mistakes that you don't need to make otherwise. If you're learning a language, keep going with it. It's always worth it, and don't beat yourself up if you have to give it up for a while, or it doesn't work, or you don't feel like you're making progress. The main thing is consistency. Just keep coming back at it. Keep coming back. Don't give up, but also don't beat yourself up if you need to take some time out. We're all very busy.
Great. And how about you? Final thought.
Yeah, actually, and we always talk about ourselves as an edtech company, right? But actually, when we started the business at the very early stage, actually, and we have two founding members. One myself from technology background, and my co-founder is from teacher background. So that's why we had a lot of the debate. So that's why actually, and very soon we start to learn each other. So we need to balance these two, right? So it's not really about a technology, maybe AI, VR, everything can resolve the language learning. No, it's not going to happen. But actually, without technology, so the language learning is very tough as well. So that's why we need to marry these two. So that's why actually, and the two of us, we were pretty balanced with each other. So she holds very high standard on the teacher selection and the curriculum development. I also bring a lot of the technology innovation, like AI technology, into the learning experience. So that's why I think, and moving on actually, and still a long journey for us. And we still need, for example, like last 4.5 years, we only focus on Chinese language learning. We are super focused company, and this year we start to launch the English, which is the most spoken language globally, right? So to serve like Europe and Southeast Asia, even in the future maybe Middle East, Latin America market. So that's why we believe like and learning language, Chinese, English are super important. And as a company, we still have a long way to go. How to bring more technology. And so that's why, and we also talk with Zoom, not only use their, and video SDK as the foundation, but also we are exploring some VR technology and together to improve the learning experience for the young learners. That's still a long way to go, I think, and happy to really share a lot and ideas with friends so we can grow together.
And I guess I'll share a final thought. I speak about 11 languages as well, and I love language learning. And I always tell people, if you don't make mistakes, you'll have no good stories to tell about your journey. So thank you all for sharing your stories of your journey. Thank you for the work you're doing to help more of us learn to connect better across cultural boundaries, sort of build more neuroplasticity in our brains, and enjoy so much a richer and fuller life for the language learning. So thank you to all of you for the work you do. Thank you for joining us in the conversation, and have a wonderful time here at the rest of the conference.